Hi everyone. I hope you're ready to start studying a new book of the Bible. This week we're going to be looking at Ezekiel, the third of the great prophets. Ezekiel has been studied by scholars, of course, but also by psychologists and psychiatrists, many of whom have come to the conclusion that he was just a little off center, that maybe a little bit of insanity. But we know as Christians, all of us could be considered insane at times. But Ezekiel was born in Judah. He grew up, mostly grew up there. He was taken captive to Babylon in 597 BC, that second wave of captives. We know that Ezekiel was married. He and his wife were both taken captive, and that she died when he was 37 years old, and this is recorded in Ezekiel 24. And Ezekiel was told not to remarry. So we know a lot about the private and personal life of Ezekiel. His name means strength in God, and he was certainly strong. He was raised up as a prophet by God for a mighty purpose. And that purpose was to show the people that all was not lost, that though they were in a foreign land, that time that they would be held in Babylon would come to an end, and they would be restored to their homeland. So we could say one of the themes of Ezekiel is restoration. Ezekiel used many object lessons to show the people the way to Yahweh, the true God. And he saw visions. And the visions that he saw are among the most glorious, the most puzzling, but the most satisfying visions that we find in the Bible. Ezekiel's visions actually parallel some that we read in Revelation chapter 4. The vision we see today in Ezekiel, we could see very similar in Revelation. So Ezekiel was raised up to be a prophet to give the people hope. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1. In my 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kebar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kebar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. And we're going to see that phrase, the hand of the Lord was on him, many times in the book of Ezekiel. So here he is standing by the Kebar River, which was actually a canal, and it flowed to the farmlands and to Babylon to bring water where it was needed. And archaeologists have found a Jewish settlement there on that canal, probably here where Ezekiel had this vision. Now this vision is the vision in which he saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. You know the song. Do you know what it represented? That's what we're going to learn next week. But the setting for that is here, starting in verse 4. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north. Now the Jews felt that calamity came from the north. After all, the Assyrians came out of the north. The Babylonians came out of the north, storms came out of the north. And so it wasn't a good sign that he saw this windstorm coming out of the north. He knew it was more than just a regular storm, because an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf, and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their four sides, they had human hands. All four of them had faces and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. So he sees this vision of these creatures in the fire with four wings each. Their wings touched each other. They each had four faces, one on each side of their head, in the front and the back. Now, the number 4 in the Bible denotes wholeness, the complete thing. We hear about the 4 corners of the earth, just like the number 7 is a number that denotes the whole thing. These creatures had these faces, and let's see what their faces were in verse 10. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side, each had the face of a lion. And on the left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. Now, these correspond to Revelation chapter 4, where John saw these creatures with these faces that we see here. Such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side. And each had 2 other wings covering his body. Each one went straight ahead. So their wings were touching each other. So they were in the form of a square, because each one touched the wings of another. And they moved. They were not just stationary there. They moved. Each one went straight ahead. Now that's significant. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go without turning as they went. After all, they didn't have to turn to look where they were going. They had eyes on each side of their head. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. And so we have this brilliant sight, this vision in front of Ezekiel's eyes. And notice he says many times, somewhat like. They were somewhat like. He can't put into words exactly what he's trying to tell us about what he sees. It's just beyond words. And the creatures, he later calls, when he sees them again, cherubim. I think Isaiah called them seraphim. But these cherubim are of angelic variety. And they are here in front of Ezekiel, bringing him a message. And the 4 faces were each different. They had a human face. They had, probably denoting intelligence and dominance. They had the face of a lion, the king of the wild animals, the leader. They all had a face of an ox or a bull, denoting strength, the dominance of the creatures that had been tamed. And they had the face of an eagle, far-seeing, far-reaching, flying in the air. All of these are denoting some attributes of God. Of course, God has so many more attributes than these. But Ezekiel felt the holiness of the moment. He couldn't see inside that square of creatures to see what was there in the fire, but there's something there. He feels it. Some spirit is directing the movements of these cherubim, and they always move in a straight line. They move back and forth and back and forth. And they are not contained in just a rigid form, but darting back and forth where they are directed by the Spirit. And I read this about God, the Spirit. God moves in a straight line. He moves towards fulfilling his purpose. Back in Ezekiel's day and in our day, God is moving forward. His purpose will be accomplished. Nothing can sidetrack God. And we have the promise that Ezekiel was given and that Ezekiel gave his people, that we will be restored. Our world will be restored to God because his purpose is to make us his own. And in these dark days, it seems that God's purpose is sidetracked. But we can be assured in the Word that God will not be sidetracked. He will allow us to fall away from him and suffer the consequences, but his purpose will ultimately be achieved. So keep that thought this week. Read the rest of chapter 1, and we'll see you next week. God bless you.